Let's go back to 1992, when black bears across the United States were on the brink of extinction. At the time, their numbers had dropped so dramatically that many biologists feared there would come a day when black bears would exist only in old photographs and fading memories. But the surviving bears endured and became part of one of the most remarkable wildlife recovery stories in modern history. Thanks to their incredible adaptability and resilience, black bears made a powerful comeback stronger than anyone expected. Today, the black bear population has rebounded to nearly 700,000 animals, with most living freely across the vast forests of North America. But this conservation success story has also created new challenges. As bear populations continue to grow, they are bringing increasing problems to farmers and communities living near forested areas. To deal with these issues, wildlife experts and hunting communities have worked together to find ways to balance conservation with population control. One of the oldest methods is bow hunting, a tradition deeply rooted in Native American culture. For many early tribes, hunting was never considered entertainment. It was an essential part of survival and a skill built on patience, discipline, and precision. Hunters often spend days or even weeks scouting, tracking, and preparing before ever taking a shot. Understanding bear behavior and movement patterns is the key to getting close without being detected. Black bears have an extraordinary sense of smell and can detect human scent from miles away. Because of this, hunters must remain extremely careful. Every movement has to be controlled, and every step must serve a purpose. They learn how to blend into the forest, moving silently like shadows to become nearly invisible to one of North America's most intelligent predators. When a bear finally appears, usually within only 20 to 40 yards, every sense becomes completely focused. One small mistake can ruin weeks of preparation in an instant. Meanwhile, in many mountainous and forested regions across North America, bear cage traps have become one of the most widely used methods of population control. Unlike the dangerous traps used decades ago, modern systems are designed to keep the animal secure while wildlife officers or trained specialists arrive on site. Massive steel traps are often placed deep in the woods near known bear travel areas or areas filled with claw marks, overturned rocks, and feeding signs. Inside the trap, strong-smelling bait such as fish, meat, or sweet pastries is used to attract bears from long distances away. When a massive steel door suddenly slams shut, the entire forest can erupt with deep roaring echoes. But the goal is not simply to capture a single bear. The larger objective is to prevent bears from moving into residential areas, destroying crops, or becoming a danger to nearby communities. Whether using traditional bows or modern cage trapping systems, the most important things remain calmness, responsibility, and respect for nature. Every decision affects the fragile balance between humans and wildlife. And as black bear populations continue to recover across North America, the debate over how humans should coexist with these powerful predators will likely continue for many years to come. So what do you think? Do hunting and population control still play an important role in modern wildlife management? Or should we move toward newer and more humane solutions? If you enjoy real stories about nature, survival, and the challenges people face in the wild, make sure to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective because every opinion and every story helps us better understand the fragile yet powerful connection between humans and the wild world around us.
Between the snow-covered mountains of Montana, more and more grizzly bears weighing hundreds of kilograms are leaving the forests and moving dangerously close to ranches and residential areas. They tear apart food storage sheds, flip over garbage bins, and leave massive footprints right outside people's homes. Even more concerning, the bears are learning exactly where food is easiest to find and becoming harder to control after every encounter with humans. Montana has long been an ideal habitat for both black bears and grizzlies. Vast wilderness regions like Glacier National Park and Bob Marshall Wilderness have allowed bear populations to thrive for decades. With their incredible adaptability, bears can find food almost anywhere, from berries and fish to livestock feed near residential areas. That has made the boundary between the wild and human life increasingly fragile. In areas where bears repeatedly return, wildlife control teams can't simply respond to incidents one by one. Every strategy has to be planned around the animal's travel routes and level of caution. One of the most common methods is using large steel cage traps placed in locations where bears have been spotted multiple times. The goal is not only to control the animal, but also to minimize the risk to both people and the bear itself. The most important factor is not the size of the trap, but the precision of the location. Before setting a trap, control teams often spend days monitoring the bear's movement patterns, from the trails it regularly uses to the way it approaches food sources. Even a small mistake can ruin the entire operation, because bears are extremely sensitive to unusual changes in their environment. Tracks in soft soil, tree trunks covered in claw marks, and overturned trash bins all become critical clues when determining where to place a trap. Trails repeatedly used over multiple nights are usually monitored the most closely. Only when the signs are clear enough is bait placed deep inside the control zone, forcing the bear to fully enter the trap instead of approaching cautiously and walking away. However, not every bear reacts the same way. Bears that have previously encountered humans or escaped earlier control operations often become extremely cautious. They can detect even the slightest changes around familiar areas and immediately avoid them. In those cases, large cage traps are no longer effective, and control teams are forced to use more discreet methods to avoid triggering suspicion. One commonly used method is a cable snare trap placed along the bear's regular travel routes. The system is carefully concealed with dirt and dry leaves, so it nearly disappears into the environment. When the bear steps into the exact position, the cable loop tightens instantly and anchors to a fixed point to limit movement. The effectiveness of this method depends heavily on field experience and the control team's ability to camouflage the setup. In the harsh conditions of Montana, bear control has never relied on luck.
Shove or not to shove? That is the question after.
From tracking signs and identifying movement corridors to choosing the right moment for deployment, every step requires patience and days of careful observation. Move too early or leave behind too much human scent, and the bear may completely change its route, making the operation far more difficult. Bear hunting also demands an extremely high level of preparation. In Montana, the use of bait is completely prohibited for ethical and ecological reasons. That forces hunters to rely on terrain, tracking skills, and a deep understanding of bear behavior instead of depending solely on equipment. Across the vast forests of Montana, the confrontation between humans and wild bears continues under constant pressure. It is not just a story about controlling dangerous animals, but also a long-standing challenge of balancing human life with the wilderness. If you found this story interesting, leave a comment and don't forget to follow for more journeys into the harsh wild landscapes of North America. Stretching across the vast fields of central Florida, where the damp soil is constantly torn up as if shaken by a silent tremor, wild boars are no longer just quiet visitors passing through the night. They appear in dense numbers, moving in organized groups, leaving behind trails of destruction that carve through the like invisible cuts. What begins as minor damage can, within just a few days, transform an entire area beyond recognition. The real concern is not the strength of individual animals, but how the entire group operates as a structured system, repetitive, precise, and increasingly unpredictable over time. In the early stages, single traps were deployed with the expectation of quickly controlling the situation. The objective was clear: remove individuals to reduce pressure. However, reality unfolded very differently. Each time one animal was captured, the rest of the group did not return as expected. Instead, they became more cautious, moved more slowly, and observed their surroundings more carefully before approaching. These small traps, rather than solving the problem, unintentionally forced the entire group to upgrade its survival instincts. Recognizing the limitations of the old approach, a new strategy began to take shape, not targeting individual animals, but the entire structure of the group. Large-scale trapping systems were designed as open spaces, with steel posts forming a wide circular perimeter that was not immediately enclosed. There was no element of panic, no sudden snapshot mechanism. Everything was arranged to appear as natural as possible, blending into the environment as if it had never existed. The most critical phase is not when the trap is activated, but the period leading up to it. Bait is placed outside the area, then gradually moved deeper inside over several days. No direct human interference occurs during this process. The herd begins to approach, hesitant at first, but gradually becoming familiar. They enter and exit repeatedly, testing, retreating, then returning. Over time, the boundary between safety and danger begins to fade. Once familiarity reaches its peak, the entire group begins moving into the trap area as part of a normal routine. This is when the human element returns, but not through rushed action. The operator monitors the entire process through camera systems, waiting for a single decisive moment, when every individual is inside the controlled zone. No one remains outside. No hesitation remains. Only then is the decision made. The triggering mechanism is activated remotely, fast, precise, and decisive. A large gate closes, leaving no gap for escape. The action takes only a moment, but it is backed by days, even weeks of preparation. Trigger too early, and part of the group escapes and learns. Too late, and the opportunity may disappear entirely. This is not a race of speed, but a test of behavioral understanding. The entire process demands near total patience. There are no human traces, no direct pressure. The environment remains untouched, as if no intervention has ever occurred. It is this silence that allows the herd to return to its normal rhythm. Except this time, everything unfolds within a carefully calculated structure. When the moment arrives, a single action is enough to conclude the entire extended preparation. The result is not measured solely by the number of animals controlled, but by the complete disruption of the group's movement system. Once that structure is removed, the familiar routes disappear with it. Pressure on agricultural areas decreases significantly, not because each individual is removed, but because the collective behavior has been broken. This demonstrates that the true effectiveness of the trap lies not in its physical mechanism, but in its ability to influence the underlying behavioral system of the entire group. At first, No one believed the situation would turn serious or spiral out of control so quickly. But after only a few nights, the lakeshore began to change in ways that were impossible to ignore. The soil was torn apart, and the water gradually turned murky, as if something beneath the surface had been stirring it from within. Then they appeared not as isolated individuals, but as an entire herd of wild boars pouring down like a dark flood, breaking every boundary between nature and human space. As the damage spread further with each passing night, the control team was forced to step in without delay. In Texas, this kind of situation is no longer unusual or unexpected. From above, a helicopter circled steadily, scanning across forests and open fields, revealing the hidden movement routes below. Everything repeated with almost fixed timing, like a pattern that never changed. Overlapping footprints formed invisible pathways etched into the land. From these small but precise details, a strategy began to take shape, built entirely on careful observation and patience. Only when the herd lost its sense of caution was the first trap finally activated. It was a smart corral system, directly connected to the control team's phones for real-time control. Everything was nearly invisible, with no noise, no disturbance, and no unusual signs. Through live camera feeds, the signal came in clearly. The entire group had gathered at the bait station. A single command was issued, and within an instant, the steel gate dropped, holding the herd in place in near silence. However, not all of them were caught in that first attempt. A few individuals remained outside and managed to escape in time. From a distance, they watched carefully. They remembered every detail. And after just one encounter like that, the herd's behavior began to change noticeably. Narrow structures were avoided. Even the smallest unusual detail was quickly detected. Their awareness increased, making the initial methods far less effective than before. What had started as a straightforward operation was now turning into a true battle of intelligence and adaptation. To overcome this shift, the strategy had to evolve quickly. Instead of forcing the situation, the control team moved to a more refined and calculated approach. A large corral trap was built in the middle of an open area, designed with multiple wide entrances for easy access. There was no roof, no sense of confinement or pressure. From the outside, it looked more like a natural feeding zone than a trap. And just as expected, the herd began to enter slowly, cautiously, testing each step before gradually becoming familiar with the space over time. The decisive moment only came when the entire herd was fully inside the structure. No signal was triggered too early, and no movement caused panic before the right time. Then, in a single instant, two massive steel gates slammed shut from opposite directions, cutting off every possible escape route. The sound of impact echoed as the boars rushed against the barriers in confusion. But the circular design absorbed the force efficiently, leaving no weak points, no gaps, and absolutely no chance of breaking through. The final operation was carried out on a dry stretch of land near the lake, identified as the herd's last retreat route after multiple observations. There, a massive circular trap was constructed, standing firm like a fortress against any attempt to escape. Every detail had been carefully calculated in advance. On the monitoring screens, each animal appeared one by one, moving slowly and cautiously into the controlled zone. None of them realized that the entire surrounding space had already been secured. And when the final gate dropped, everything came to an end. No more nights of destruction. No more dark waves returning to disrupt the fragile balance. The next morning, transport teams began their work in a controlled and organized manner. There was no rush, no aggressive handling at any point. Every step was carried out with care to minimize stress on the animals as much as possible. Mobile barriers were set up, combined with gentle sound cues to guide the herd toward the transport vehicles. From there, they were relocated to designated management areas in accordance with regulations, becoming part of a long-term and sustainable control process. Because in the end, this is not a battle of strength or force. It is a battle of understanding and precision. Every trap, every activation, depends on accurately reading the behavior of the animals and anticipating their reactions. It is a process that requires patience, timing, and a deep awareness of how patterns form and change over time. And only when humans learn to adapt faster than the patterns they face can we truly protect crops, water sources, and the fragile balance of nature. If you want to explore more ways humans are confronting wildlife through strategy and technology, make sure to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. No longer appearing only secretly at night, many groups of wild boars have now started showing up openly during the daytime across large agricultural areas. Residents constantly see groups of 3 to 10 animals crossing fields before moving deeper into areas with dense crops. They move in clear lines, almost as if they are completely familiar with the area. At times, entire groups appear very close to where farmers are working before quickly scattering toward another location. As the number of boars continues to grow, their range of activity also expands rapidly across surrounding areas. It did not take long for the consequences to become clearly visible on a large scale. Many sections of land were torn up as if they had been plowed by heavy machinery. Rows of crops were flattened across multiple areas. What worried many people even more was that the boars did not appear randomly, but continuously returned to the same locations. Some fences were bent or knocked out of place after the groups charged through them. Residents tried using lights, loud noises, and many other methods to drive them away, but the results did not last long. As soon as the area became quiet again, the boars returned as if they had never been stopped before. As the level of destruction increased rapidly, large-scale monitoring of the groups began. Helicopters appeared above the most heavily affected areas to conduct aerial surveys. From above, the movement routes of the boars became clearly visible between open ground and areas of crops that had already been damaged multiple times. Some groups became fully exposed while crossing large open spaces before moving deeper into areas with food sources. Along several major movement routes, hunters carrying bows and arrows began setting up ambushes to force the groups to move toward pre-planned areas. After many days of continuous tracking, the movement patterns of the boars were finally identified clearly. They almost always returned to the same travel corridors instead of changing locations randomly. Based on that pattern, trap systems were set up directly along the routes most frequently used by the animals. Large steel frames were firmly anchored into the ground with deep stakes in order to withstand the impact of many boars rushing in at the same time. The surrounding netting was pressed tightly against the ground so that no gaps remained. After the entire structure was completed, bait was placed deep inside to draw the groups fully into the controlled area. During the following nights, the entire area around the traps was continuously monitored by cameras. The first animals approached very slowly, repeatedly stopping to observe before moving closer to the bait area. They circled around the edge of the trap briefly, before gradually stepping inside. Once they detected no danger, the animals behind them quickly followed in small groups. The number inside steadily increased after each movement wave. Before long, several boars began pushing and competing for food in the center area, causing their level of caution to decrease noticeably over time. As soon as most of the group had gathered inside, the trap system was activated immediately. The steel gate slammed shut extremely quickly, blocking every escape route before the boars could react. Within seconds, the entire area turned chaotic as the trapped animals rushed in different directions, searching for a way out. Some slammed hard into the netting, but were unable to break through the structure that had already been firmly secured. Choosing the right moment allowed most of the group to be contained in a single operation. After the control process was completed, the boars were kept stable inside the system before being transported away from the area. As the number of boars decreased, many agricultural areas gradually became stable again, and the level of destruction also slowly declined over time.
Bears do not appear with loud noises in the middle of the night. Their presence often begins with very subtle signs that are easy to overlook without careful observation. A large footprint pressed deep behind the house. A trash can lid slightly displaced. Long scratch marks across a wooden door. All are enough to notice, but not enough to cause immediate concern. The farm owner sees these signs but chooses to ignore them, reassuring himself that it was just a passing visit. Perhaps the bear will not return. The prolonged silence allows the risk to quietly grow without being recognized. As time passes, the level of danger becomes more apparent. The bear no longer stays at the edge of the area but moves closer into human living spaces. Its range expands from the backland to areas near livestock pens and food storage. The frequency of appearances increases night after night. Under motion sensor lights, the bear moves slowly but no longer keeps its distance as before. Familiarity makes it less reactive to the surroundings. When wildlife begins to adapt to human presence, the risk of direct encounters becomes clearer and harder to control. It does not take long for this behavior to become a habit. The bear begins returning along fixed routes, repeating almost the exact time and location where food was previously found. These visits are no longer random but follow a clear pattern. As the signs repeat consistently, trap deployment begins. The bear approaches the familiar area, gradually moving toward the bait without recognizing the risk. The distance to the trap door narrows. Tension builds as each step may determine the outcome. The moment of activation is approaching. To fully understand this situation, it is necessary to examine the underlying cause. Bears do not naturally seek out humans if their habitat remains stable. When natural food sources decline, they are forced to look for easier alternatives. Residential areas become reliable sources of food, from waste to livestock feed. A keen sense of smell allows bears to detect food from long distances. Once they successfully access it, they remember the location and return. This behavior is not random but a survival response to environmental change. Once the behavior is clearly identified, trap deployment is carried out with precision. The trap is placed directly along the bear's familiar travel route. The cage is firmly secured to the ground to prevent movement. The interior space is wide enough for the bear to enter naturally without suspicion. Bait is placed deep inside to ensure the bear fully steps in. When the bear reaches the correct position, the closing mechanism is triggered. The trap door shuts quickly, leaving no gap. Everything happens within a very short moment. After the trap is activated, the bear is contained inside with no way to escape. The surrounding area is quickly secured to ensure safety. Further handling is carried out according to established procedures to minimize risk. Once the bear no longer returns, the level of damage decreases significantly. Previously affected areas gradually return to a stable condition. However, a successful capture does not mean the risk is completely eliminated. If conditions remain unchanged, similar behavior may occur with other individuals. Controlling bears is not about direct confrontation but about properly managing the environment. When easily accessible food sources are removed, the reason for returning gradually disappears. Maintaining a safe distance helps protect humans and preserve natural balance. When the environment is no longer attractive, bear behavior will change over time. This is a long-term and sustainable solution.
What would you do when facing over 90 kilograms of muscle charging wildly through the dark? For us, that's not a rare situation. It's a routine part of daily work in the Mississippi Delta. In this world, every mistake comes at a cost. Destroyed crops, damaged property, and sometimes human safety itself. We are a rapid response team specializing in wild hog control, one of the most serious ecological threats in this region. Wild hogs don't just tear through fields in a matter of hours. They collapse levees, overturn farmland, and carry a range of dangerous diseases. Our work doesn't begin with action, but with observation. Deep tracks pressed into wet soil, freshly churned mud, or scattered corn. Every detail becomes data used to map the movement patterns of an entire sounder. Our goal is not reckless action. Instead, it's calculated control, minimizing risk to people and livestock while ensuring long-term effectiveness. Two corral trap systems, each about 6 meters long, are deployed at strategic points. When driven inside, the hogs panic, slamming into the netting with full force. But instead of rigid resistance, the net is designed to flex, absorbing impact and holding them without creating a breaking point. To make that possible, preparation takes days. The first phase is conditioning. The net is suspended high on T-posts nearly 1.8 meters tall. Beneath it, dozens of kilograms of corn are spread evenly, creating a sense of safety. The hogs come to feed, repeating the behavior multiple times without encountering danger. That familiarity becomes the key to breaking their natural caution. A few days later, the system switches to capture mode. The net is lowered, everything appears unchanged, except this time, there is no escape. Still, wild hogs are not easily fooled. Infrared camera data after 1 a.m. shows the entire group lingering at the trap's edge, using their snouts to pull bait without fully stepping inside. Not a single animal crosses the boundary. This is where patience is tested. One wrong move, and the entire operation could fail. Nearly an hour passes in silence. Then the lead sow, the one guiding the group, finally steps across the edge. It enters, probes cautiously, then begins to feed. Within seconds, the others follow. In that moment, everything changes. Once the entire group is inside, the system is triggered. The net drops, enclosing the entire space. Success doesn't come from luck, but from precise understanding of their behavior. The next morning, the scene looks like a storm has just swept through. Mud is scattered everywhere, the net stretched tight under the pressure of dozens of bodies trampling and struggling to escape. The noise is relentless, chaotic, yet the structure holds. We approach in a controlled manner, using specialized catch poles with cable loops to restrain each individual. Every movement must be synchronized and precise. There is no room for error. At another site near a livestock area, the situation becomes more complicated. A section of the net is torn, a sign that an individual had escaped before. We repaired it, but the connectors weren't strong enough. With their sharp memory, the hogs can return to that exact weak point. In cases like this, there is no room for risk. A swift decision is made to eliminate the threat before it spreads. As night falls, we continue moving between trap sites. Each location tells a different story, but all revolve around one principle: understand behavior to control behavior. At the final site, the most destructive individuals are contained inside. They charge the net in desperation, but there is no escape. The work continues until the last light of dusk fades. When the operation ends, the exhaustion finally sets in. But what remains is more than just numbers brought under control. It is stability restored to an entire region. With wild hogs, strength doesn't lie in muscle, but in their ability to learn and adapt. And if the strategy isn't precise, a single mistake is enough to render every previous effort meaningless.
At first, everything happened almost invisibly. A trash bin slightly out of place, a few deep scratches on a tree trunk, large footprints pressed into damp soil after a night of rain. No one saw it as a real threat. But within just a few days, the signs began to connect, like pieces of an unseen map. The bear was no longer appearing at random. It was moving in patterns, returning along the same paths at the same times, as if the entire area had been committed to memory. Once the movement pattern was identified, the control team didn't rush in. Instead of intervening immediately, they divided the area into two strategic control points. Two gateways the bear was almost certain to pass through. One sat along the primary route, where tracks appeared most frequently. The other was placed deeper in, at the spot where the bear lingered the longest, where it searched for food and began to let its guard down. This wasn't just about setting traps. It was about building a controlled corridor.
There. It'll be a good one for the freezer. Get right down on your knee. You want a nice low.
What made the situation complex wasn't the bear's strength, but its memory and adaptability. It wasn't acting on instinct alone, it was learning from its environment. A reliable food source became a behavioral anchor, and with each return, it grew more confident
more precise, moving with almost no deviation. This calculated repetition turned even the smallest human error into a serious risk.
Look a little bit ugly, but what that plastic's going to do is
The first point. The area was left completely untouched for several nights. No foreign scent, no human trace, nothing that might raise suspicion. The bear continued to pass through, repeating its familiar route as if nothing had changed. But that very lack of change was the most critical preparation. When a moment came, the mechanism was triggered at the exact instant it entered the control zone. A fast, precise hold that stopped its movement along the very path it trusted most. However, surveillance quickly revealed another reality. The bear wasn't alone. New movements kept appearing on camera. Other individuals following the same routes, at the same times, as if they shared the same behavioral map. Clearly, a single interception point wouldn't solve the problem. The strategy had to expand, from blocking paths to controlling stopping points and
what's gonna really
the second location, the approach shifted entirely. It was no longer a direct interception, but a controlled lure space. Food was placed in an area familiar to the bear, but not out in the open as before. Instead, it was arranged with depth, forcing the animal to move further in, step into a more defined space where its behavior could be fully managed. This process didn't happen overnight. At first, everything was kept safe, food close by, easy to access, no pressure. Then gradually, the distance increased. With each return, the bear had to move a little deeper, stay a little longer. There was no force, only slow adaptation. And through that process, it began to accept the new space as a natural part of its behavior. Once the habit had been established long enough, the system was finally complete. The bear moved in, fully focused on the food ahead. As it crossed the threshold, the mechanism activated instantly. No widespread chaos, no disruption to the entire area. Each intervention affected only a single individual, keeping the others from changing their behavior abruptly. From those scattered early signs to the establishment of two control points, one intercepting movement, the other shaping behavior. It all came together as a complete system. This was no longer about setting traps in the conventional sense, but about understanding and guiding animal behavior. When a strategy is built on how they move and learn, Its effectiveness lies not only in immediate results, but in maintaining long-term stability across the entire area.
Willow, she actually loves.
I loaded it.
At first, everything was just a few scattered signs appearing around the farm bordering the pine forest in northern Michigan. Feed containers were torn apart overnight. Tree trunks near the fence bore long, deep scratches, as if someone had slashed the bark with a steel blade. Then came sections of steel fencing bent in almost impossible ways. The locals knew exactly what it meant. An adult black bear had begun moving closer to the residential area, and it was no longer afraid of humans. At first, many believed it was just a temporarily lost animal. But within a few weeks, the infrared camera system recorded its repeated appearances across multiple locations. What concerned the wildlife control team was not its nearly 200-kilogram size, but the way it moved. It did not wander randomly. It learned quickly, constantly changed its routes, and appeared almost exclusively at times when human activity was absent. As the damage began to exceed control, the management team was forced to deploy a different strategy. This time, they used a large steel cage trap designed specifically for bears accustomed to urban environments. Unlike standard small traps, this system stretched nearly 4 meters long, with a reinforced steel frame strong enough to withstand the violent impact of a panicked adult bear. But the most important factor was not the trap's strength, it was how it was deployed. Instead of placing the trap near the damaged areas, the team selected a movement corridor deep within the forest, where cameras had consistently recorded the bear passing through before approaching the farm. They understood that large bears are often highly cautious of any unfamiliar object appearing along their usual paths. For that reason, the trap was not activated immediately. For several consecutive days, the steel door was fixed fully open, allowing the bear to gradually acclimate to its presence. The bait was not placed deep inside but spread in layers, leading from outside into the cage. By the 8th night, the bear's behavior began to change. It no longer circled the trap for long, but moved directly inside to access the food. Even then, the team still did not activate the system. They continued allowing the animal to feel completely safe within the steel enclosure. The goal was not to capture it quickly, but to eliminate its sense of caution entirely. Then the decisive moment arrived. At nearly 2 a.m., the thermal camera recorded the bear moving deep into the far end of the cage to reach the main food container. Within seconds, the heavy steel door weighing hundreds of kilograms slammed shut with a thunderous echo through the dark forest. The bear reacted almost instantly. It lunged violently at the steel bars, using its full weight to force an escape. The entire structure shook continuously under the massive impacts. But the elongated tunnel design helped disperse the force, preventing the animal from generating enough momentum to destroy the structure. Notably, the control team did not approach immediately after the trap was triggered. They waited for a period of time, allowing the bear to gradually calm down. Adult bears in a state of panic can injure themselves if further agitated by bright lights or loud noise. Only near dawn did the specialized team move in, equipped with a transport vehicle and tranquilizing equipment, operating from a safe distance. As the forest slowly brightened under the cold light of dawn, the bear was finally relocated away from the residential area. But for those involved in the operation, the most important outcome was not simply capturing a dangerous animal. What they truly pursued was the ability to control the situation without disrupting the natural balance of the entire region. And in that silent confrontation between humans and these massive predators, victory did not belong to strength, but to patience, understanding, and the ability to read even the smallest behaviors of wild bears.